It's 12 years since U.S. presidential candidate Ralph Nader won nearly 3 million votes on the Green Party's ticket. What can they do to break the monopoly of Democrats and Republicans this year? You're watching Inside Story US 2012 from Washington. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu. In the 2000 US presidential election, Ralph Nader won nearly 3 million votes on the Green Party's ticket. Running in 43 US states, his campaign called for economic justice, universal health care, affordable housing, workers' rights, and tougher gun laws. He rejected criticism he'd taken away votes from the Democrats' Al Gore and helped the Republicans' George W. Bush win, saying you can't spoil a system that's spoiled to the core, and he predicted the Greens would emerge as a powerful Democratic force. But in subsequent elections, the Greens won just a fraction of the 2000 vote. They're due to select this year's candidate in July. Their policies are well to the left of the mainstream, calling for an economic bill of rights which offers all workers a proper living wage. They accuse the Democrats and Republicans of placing the interests of Wall Street first. An emphasis on comprehensive health care, education and housing, as well as proper services for the elderly, plus a fundamental shift in environmental policy. From breaking the addiction to oil to what it calls a World War II scale change in the way energy is produced and spent. And the political terrain couldn't be more difficult. Barack Obama is on the defensive over high gas prices and drilling, and he's been accused of putting the environment ahead of jobs. I talked to Ralph Nader and asked him why the Green Party failed to capitalize on their relative success in the 2000 election.
Because they have a great agenda that is supported by a majority of the American people in one area after another. Full Medicare for all, living wage, cracking down on corporate crime, a more peaceful foreign policy, cutting down on the bloated, wasteful military budget. But they didn't have the people on the ground. They didn't run enough local candidates, which tend to build up a national party from the bottom up, and they couldn't raise much money. And that's the problem in a country where there's a winner take all, unlike other Western countries where if you get 5% of the vote, you get 5% of the parliament. In this country, unless you get a majority of the vote or a plurality, you get zero. And that discourages people from joining third parties.
So you're saying they were hurt so badly in that election that they were unable to recover?
No, I think that 12 years ago, we gave them a lot of visibility, a lot of energy, but then when they started running other candidates, they didn't have that level of visibility or energy in 2004 and 2008.
So we are back in the election season right now. In fact, it never seems to stop. It seems like an endless cycle. Here we have the two main parties again dominating everything in this election. How does one break that stranglehold that these two parties have on the system?
Other countries have 4, 5, 7 viable parties. But they have proportional representation, they have instant runoff voting. We don't have those. It's a winner-take-all system. And I think the only way to do it is either a multi-billionaire goes in, like Ross Perot did in 1992, and turn it into a three-way race. He got 19 million votes. Or you have a coalition of small parties who start very early, and they fill and run for a lot of local offices, city council, zoning board, board of education, and then over a period of 8 or 12 years, 3 cycles, bring it to a level where it could be a three-way race.
What's wrong with Green Party strategy right now? Because if you look at what is going on politically, they don't seem to feature very strongly on the political radar.
Well, what's wrong is they're marginalized by the press. Because we have a winner-take-all system and a two-party dominant system, the press doesn't cover third-party activity. And when that isn't covered, the polls don't cover it, and it becomes like a vicious circle of marginalization.
Is it perhaps time for the Green Party to work within the system? I mean, you've got the Republicans. They're pretty monolithic in their views and policies. But you have the Democrats, which have a wide range of views. I mean, ranging from, on the left, people of the likes of Dennis Kucinich, all the way to the right, the so-called blue dog Democrats, a very conservative Democrats. So is there a place for them, say, in the Democrat Party?
I don't see it, because the Democrats are dialing for the same commercial dollars for their campaigns that the Republicans are. Look at all the money President Obama raises from Wall Street, for example, and corporate lawyers setting records. And that brings the two parties more and more alike. So on foreign military policy, they're pretty much indistinguishable, apart from a little rhetoric, the military budget, the bailout of Wall Street. So the Green Party reacts adversely to that, tries to make its own mark. The other big exclusion is that the two parties control the Presidential Debate Commission, and they control who gets on. And they don't want anybody on who challenges them. A majority of the polls wanted me on the Presidential Debate Commission in 2000, 2004. That didn't make any difference because the commission is a private corporation controlled by the two parties. And it was exposed by a Lebanese American, George Farah, F-A-R-A-H, in a book in 2004. And he'd give you a terrific interview on that when the focus comes on the Commission on Presidential Debates.
So what can the Green Party do to influence the general election, and how can it, or any other third party, break the stranglehold of the two-party system? Plus, how important will energy and environmental issues be in 2012? To discuss that, I'm joined live from San Francisco by Tim Dickinson from Rolling Stone magazine, and here in the studio by Scott McLarty from the Green Party, and Myron Ebell. He's the Director of Energy and Global Warming Policy at the Competitive Enterprise Institute and prominent climate change skeptic. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Scott, let me start with you. As we've just been hearing, the Green Party did very well in the 2000 election, something like 3 million votes, but it hasn't seemed to be able to have done as well since then. So you're going to contest this year's election. What's the strategy now?
Well, we were very lucky in 2000 to have Ralph Nader running as our national candidate, and he's one of the giants of the 20th century. Everybody knows who he is. We didn't have such nationally famous candidates in 2004 and 2008. But I would dispute that we haven't done quite as well, because really the growth of a party like the Green Party has to take place at the state and local level, and especially at the local level. Ralph Nader just talked about that a little bit, and we have had a lot of people elected to public office during the past 12 years. There was a burst of energy, of course, after 2000, and we're continuing. We're participating in the elections this year in 2012. We have candidates running for office at all levels again, and we have two candidates recognized by the party right now who are competing for our presidential nomination. Our national nominating convention will take place in Baltimore in mid-July. We hope that you pay attention to us. It should be a lot of fun. Our candidates are Dr. Jill Stein, a physician from Massachusetts, and the very well-known actress Roseanne Barr. So it's going to be a very colorful year for the Green Party.
Okay, let's go to Tim Dickinson. He's there in San Francisco. Tim, do you think that the Greens have failed to capture the public imagination, just failed to get support over the years, and that these issues that they campaign on are just not issues that interest the public?
I'm not sure that any of that is true exactly. I mean, the Green Party was very damaged, I think, by the widespread public perception that they spoiled the 2000 election and threw it to George Bush. And so all of the issues that they cared about, in fact, suffered for 8 years under someone who was indeed much worse than Al Gore from their perspective. And so I think now, though, you see the Occupy Wall Street movement moving outside of the political system, very much with the same sort of anti-corporate, rejectionist agenda, pro-environment, pro-people, but they're not working through the electoral system anymore. And so I think you're seeing this energy out on the street, and frankly, I haven't seen the Green Party be able to harness that effectively as a political force.
Myron, do you think there is a place for a third party in U.S. politics?
Yes. I don't agree with the Green Party on much, but I think it's good to have ideologically pure parties to confront and keep honest the big parties that have much broader coalitions and that are always trying to move a little bit right or left in order to attract a majority. On the left, you have the Greens. On the right, you have the Libertarian Party. I believe former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson is running for their nomination. And I think both these parties are very useful. They get the issues out there. I think they deserve more coverage in the mainstream media because although maybe they're too pure to be elected, they make their case, and I think that's very important.
Okay, let's look at one of the issues. Now, the U.S. president has been heavily criticized by Republicans for not supporting the building of the Keystone XL pipeline. That's a crude oil pipeline which would travel from Canada to Texas carrying crude oil. He's since welcomed a move by the same company, TransCanada, to build the southern leg of that pipeline. And a poll in February by Quinnipiac University asked those surveyed whether they support or oppose Keystone. 64% said they support building. 23% oppose it. 13% of those asked said they were unsure. Scott, does that make it a harder job for you?
Well, the Green Party has recognized the Keystone XL pipeline as a public health menace and as an environmental menace in several ways. And we've been quite critical of the Obama administration for a range of retreats, including the endorsement of offshore oil drilling along the Atlantic coast, especially in the wake of the Fukushima disaster in Japan. We've been critical of his support for new nuclear power plants. Actually, we're critical of the offshore drilling because of the BP disaster. We're critical of the nuclear power plants because of the Fukushima disaster that occurred in Japan. And also the maintenance of this disastrous mountaintop removal mining that's been taking place, spoiling landscapes and poisoning public drinking water in West Virginia and in other states. And you know, I dispute that we're an ideologically based party, although we do have certain ideologies. I think we are a practical party, and we're very much concerned about the future of the planet and the health of future generations of Americans, and that is why we've taken the stands that we do.
Tim, do you think that the whole issue of the environment is being very narrowly defined in the United States, especially during this election campaign? It's just being confined to things like gas prices and the Keystone Pipeline?
I mean, it has been, and I think that a factor of the economy here. I mean, we're still very much struggling to get out of the worst recession in living memory, and so environmental issues have taken a back seat along with many other things. But we've also come out of a bruising battle where Democrats actually passed a cap-and-trade bill in the House, and that was thanks to Myron Ebell and Republicans and others effectively killed, and you know, so the politics around that are not front and center. That's clearly not something that's going to be moving forward aggressively right now. But at the same time, you've got it's sort of a defensive posture because you've got all the Republican candidates now firmly embracing global warming denial. And so I think, but in general, it's sort of taking a back seat to the economic issues.
Okay, Myron, you want to respond to that?
Well,
We've described you as a skeptic.
I think the polling is clear. For instance, just on global warming, a Pew Center poll asked Americans recently to rank 22 issues of public concern. Global warming finished dead last out of 22, and some of the 22 didn't seem very important to me. So, and environment was way down there too. So I think Tim is right. It's when the economy is struggling, other issues take second or third place. I think the environmental issues are very clear now in the sense that as long as gas prices are going up, people are going to want more oil production. They're going to support things like the Keystone Pipeline, and they're going to support long-term solutions like opening the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to drilling in Alaska, more offshore drilling. And I think that will dominate as long as people feel that the gas prices are really hurting their standard of living.
Well, even climate change seems to be totally off the radar. We have been...
we should point out that that climate change itself is not dependent on poll results. It's dependent on sound scientific analysis. And you know, from the Green Party's point of view, we see a huge opportunity being missed right now. And you know, there's a chance now to create millions of new jobs in new energy technologies, in retrofitting homes and buildings, and the landscapes of towns and cities to become more energy efficient, and moving towards public transportation kinds of systems to decrease the amount of car traffic that has been pumping so much CO2 into the atmosphere. And what is lacking here is the political will for projects like this. And you know, there's a terrific there's a terrific model, and that is the New Deal. The New Deal, in the New Deal, I was just reading recently that the Civil Works Administration, in the course of 2 months, created 4 million new jobs for Americans that needed jobs. We have a chance to do that now with conservation and new energy technology programs, and it's going to take something like a third party, some kind of revolutionary change in the status quo of these two corporate-run two parties that don't want a program like that.
Okay, let's listen to some of the views from the two parties. We're going to first hear from the leading Republican candidates and then from President Obama. Now, on the campaign trail, Republican candidates have been critical of Barack Obama's environmental and energy policies, and some of them have burnished their credentials as climate change skeptics. Let's watch.
They put forth these phony studies. I referred to global warming as not climate science, but political science.
That we don't know what's causing climate change on this planet, and the idea of spending trillions and trillions of dollars to try and reduce CO2 emissions is not the right course for us.
Okay, now let's listen to the president. Barack Obama has been forced to defend himself over his environmental and energy policies. He was speaking on Thursday. He said he was committed to U.S. oil production and had approved a number of pipelines, and he criticized Republicans for what he called phony election promises that drilling means lower gas prices. Let's watch.
Step 1, drill. Step 2, drill. Step 3, keep drilling. And by the way, we'll drill in your backyard. Wherever it is, we're just going to put up more rigs. Now, if there's one thing I know about New Hampshire, it's that your political bull detector is pretty keen. It's pretty sharp. You know that we can't just drill our way to lower gas prices.
That was President Obama there. Let's go to Tim Dickinson in San Francisco. Tim, do you think that these environmental issues are being held hostage by just one number, the unemployment number? Because every time the president or the Democrats announce some kind of initiative to combat global warming or some kind of environmental issue, the other side responds that that is going to hamper economic growth, it's going to increase unemployment in the country.
Well, I mean, that's certainly long been the right-wing attack on environmental policies. I think the Obama administration, to its credit, has been very effective in creating new gas standards, gas mileage standards, creating space and subsidies for green energy that's sort of not taking away from the oil companies as much, but sort of in a roundabout way providing a path to a greener energy future. So I think they sort of quietly have been quite effective at that, but they certainly haven't been willing to sort of take the fight to the Republicans on climate change as a threat to humanity, and we need to stand up and deal with this seriously. And I think that's a failure of leadership, but it's one that's shared widely around the world right now in these tough economic times.
Myron, is that the Republican view, that environmental issues are always trumped by economic growth?
No, I don't think so. I think that Republicans don't fall for this line that somehow economic growth and wealth and prosperity are bad for the environment. In fact, there's a very close connection between prosperity and wealth and environmental protection. The World Bank has done a number of studies. The countries in the world that have the highest environmental standards and quality are the ones that are the wealthiest. The problem with environmental degradation is really poverty. When people are in subsistence lifestyles and they have to clear brush or chop down forests in order to have firewood or fuel for their cooking indoors without a chimney, I mean, this is where you get real environmental degradation, and you also get huge negatives on human health. So we think that prosperity and economic growth are extremely good for the environment.
I think that's erroneous, and we can just look at a country like Brazil, which is where the leveling of thousands, perhaps millions of acres of the rainforest there is not taking place because there are a few poor people around the perimeters that are chopping down a couple of trees to burn in their fireplaces. It's because of some very large companies that want to get a hold of that land and turn it into pasture for cattle that can be processed for export beef.
But Scott, in Brazil, there is a legal problem, which is you can only claim forest if you agree to clear it. That's how you get a hold of the land. The property rights incentives are wrong in Brazil, not the fact that Brazil's economy is growing. It's that they have not thought through the value of the rainforest and how people could be able to claim it as private property and take care of it rather than clear it. So I don't think that's a good example.
I don't disagree that that economic prosperity is tied to any kind of environmental depredation or exploitation or anything like that. As I said before, we do have the capacity now to create lots of jobs and
that's where I disagree.
Different kinds of environmental and related public health programs that can benefit us environmentally, and we, history shows, and the New Deal is the best example, that such programs are very, very successful.
That's where I disagree.
Okay, I'll give you a chance to respond in a moment. Let me go back to Tim Dickinson. Tim, I just want to get back to the Green Party. You mentioned earlier that, we now have the Occupy movement, and they're getting a lot of support around the country. What they say appears to catch the public imagination. But, I'm wondering if the Green Party and other groups like Occupy are politically relevant. Are they politically relevant? Because you have to translate that support into support on Capitol Hill.
Well, again, I don't think that the relevance that the Occupy movement has is political within the electoral process. I mean, it's about changing the narrative right now, and these are people who are fed up with the political process exactly as the process and are determined to work outside of it and make it respond to what are overwhelming concerns of the American people. And so you see even Mitt Romney now talking, adopting the frame of the 99%, making the 1% pay their fair share. And so I think they're having a real impact, but it's not within this electoral system. It's saying the electoral system is, as Ralph Nader was talking about, rotten to the core, and this is the way we express our dissent and sort of opt out of the system and demand change, not through our legislators, but here in the street, facing riot cops if necessary. So I think that's the energy that's there with the Occupy movement, and I think it's a failure, frankly, of the Green Party to be unable to sort of harness that or channel that into a productive political process so far.
Myron Ebell?
Well, I'd like to get back to this idea that we can create a clean, green economy by going back to the New Deal programs. I think President Obama is with the Green Party on this. He keeps talking about how many green jobs we can create by having subsidizing and mandating wind and solar power and other renewable technologies. The problem is, and this is where the difference is with the New Deal, it's often claimed, and this may be legend.
But you support what he says, that we can create a lot of green jobs?
No, we can't. Not and have economic growth. If we want to shrink the economy, it was claimed in the New Deal, and this may be legend, that people were hired to dig ditches or holes and then hired to fill them up again. That's actually makes much more economic sense than what's going on with the clean, green economy, because we are subsidizing wind and solar power, and when it comes online, it's not just even like if you just dug a hole and filled it up again, where it's like throwing money and burying it. It's actually going to cost people money because that wind and solar power costs a lot more than conventional energy. So in fact, the New Deal was much better.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, we subsidize oil and gas production massively.
No.
National security apparatus especially.
No, look, this has been studied to death. The EIA came up with a study that they showed that per megawatt hour, wind and solars are subsidized for about $25. Okay. Coal and natural gas were 44 cents and 25 cents, and per megawatt hour compared to $25. Now,
okay.
if you look,
all right,
Myron, if you listen to what I said before,
it's not just every year
we've got 30 seconds.
Subsidies on all sorts of tax incentives, drilling subsidies, manufacturing.
President Obama said $4 billion
directly.
And $4 billion is what it amounts to.
We have a massive national security apparatus that's built up to protect the Strait of Hormuz and all the oil transit lines. And so it's just an absurd argument to say that that oil and gas is somehow standard energy is unsubsidized and green energy is overly subsidized.
We are going to have to end it there, folks. I'm sorry, we've run out of time. Thanks to all of you for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's it from the Inside Story team here in Washington, D.C. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, where you can find more information about the program. And we want to hear from you. Tell us what stories you think we should be covering. Send your ideas directly to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye for now.